Time now to get to Ozzie Jurek. He's been waiting patiently on the line. Maybe we've got some good news finally for that struggling Calgary market. They could use some good news. You just heard Joseph Schachter saying that oil prices look like they may have one more dip before a tremendous buying opportunity comes up somewhere maybe early in the first quarter of 2017. Ozzie, what about it? We had talked earlier about maybe that foreign buyers tax would may be bad news for the pricing in Vancouver, or at least money coming into Vancouver, but very good news for other alternative jurisdictions that don't have that buyer's tax.
Yeah, and not only that, it's simply the higher prices that pension funds and REITs have paid in Vancouver and have seen huge increases. Last week in our newsletter, we pointed out how many of them actually had sold and are selling. For instance, the Ontario Healthcare of Ontario Pension Funds put up the Willingdon Park, which is a 9-building office complex in Burnaby, and that doubled in 12 years to an estimated $400 million. Guess what, where they're going? They bought a 50% stake in Calgary's TransCanada downtown office tower for $247 million. And if you think they're alone, they're not alone, Mike. A lot of these big boys are looking at the crazy kind of cap rates that you have to pay in Vancouver, and then even Calgary with a large office vacancy rate becomes obviously interesting to them. Our Vancouver-based pure industrial real estate investment trust bought a portfolio of Alberta industrial buildings, 1.2 million square feet. RioCan REIT, which is the largest real estate investment trust in Canada, began construction in Calgary East Village on a $300 million, 600,000 square foot condominium tower with 180,000 square feet of retail. Toronto companies like the Torgan Group or Great Golf are building 4 towers of condominiums with retail space and institutional space. Hey, and you know what? Calgary's detached house sales in September were higher than a year ago. So what gives?
Well, it is interesting, though, because obviously they're making investments. When you start looking at these major pools of capital, like a pension fund or RioCan REIT, et cetera, they're making longer-term investments. They're not looking to trade some market. It would be absurd in real estate. But, talk about a classic sell high and buy low. I mean, you're selling Vancouver, as you said, the Healthcare of Ontario Pension Fund, doubles their money in the 12 years, makes a lot of dough, and moves into a market that, again, we've chronicled it on our show, but, come on, the commercial real estate market in Calgary was just nailed because, of course, you got a lot of new buildings being brought on, and by the time they're open, you've had this huge drop in oil. So, yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, people in Calgary and Alberta may be smiling a little bit at this one because these guys have done their homework and they've come up with, thinking that those prices are very attractive at this point.
And that's exactly the point, because these big pension funds, they're big boys, and they have some of the best real estate analysts in the country. And when you look at HOOP, the Ontario Fund, 12 years ago, Vancouver wasn't a great buy either, right? It was, speculative and economic crisis and so on. That came into Vancouver and did really well. So I'm just saying that we like Calgary and Edmonton. I always have liked both of those cities. And we tell our investors, you've got to watch. There will be great opportunities. Now, we are recommending not to be like the big boys and go in now, but certainly sometime next year, there'll be some great opportunities in Calgary and Edmonton.
There's an interesting stat that comes out of, now let's go to the residential for a sec. You just alluded to that September sales were better than a year ago in September. But here's one other aspect. In Vancouver, as we know, and we chronicled very clearly, thanks to you, but we've had a decline in activity since April. So there's been a market slowdown, but prices haven't really had a tremendous reaction. So I'm looking at Calgary, and I'm surprised to see how well their prices have held up despite sort of 2 years of languishing sales.
Yeah, that's, the average price is sort of within $2,000 of what they were in sort of booming 2014. We haven't really sort of, at least in the numbers, hasn't been taking it on the chin. Now, of course, last year already sales were down, so being up from last year is not being up from 2014. But overall, both Edmonton and Calgary, with all the negative news, are really hanging in there quite nicely. I think also a lot of the cities in Alberta, they are taking the gloves off and fighting back. You take Grand Prairie, they're offering you now a builder $15,000 per residential unit in a mixed-use building, $10,000 per residential unit in a purely residential building, $50,000 grant for facade improvements, no property taxes for 3 years, no minimum parking requirements. So, and Grand Prairie, by the way, is the number one most entrepreneurial city in Canada, and cities under 150,000. So you take a city like that, and they're saying, look, we believe in ourselves. We're going to put some money into the new hospital and new money into schools and so on to keep things going, because they know that sooner or later oil will come back. It always has over the last 2 years. I agree with Joseph, not in the short term, but maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, we're back as usual.
It's a fascinating time because that also spells out another problem. We talked about the brand new mortgage rules going back a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things I said was a real problem was it's a one-size-fits-all approach when it's not a one-size market. Vancouver was obviously outselling the whole country for several years. Toronto joining in, had a great September in Toronto and a great few years there. But that wasn't the case elsewhere. So here you have someone like Grande Prairie trying to encourage building and activity in the real estate market, and then you're adding on these new mortgage rules that are certainly going to slow things down. And it just shows the challenge with putting in something that's across the country on a one set of rules, because clearly the Canadian economy isn't the same all across the country.
Yeah, and that blows my mind. I mean, hopefully our government has the brightest minds advising them. You take an average
for goodness sakes, Ozzie, you're dreaming. My goodness gracious. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
But look at Grande Prairie. The average price is $350,000. So with my 5% down, I would have had a very affordable $1,200 a month. I can certainly afford the mortgage. But now I will not qualify for the then, say, $300,000 mortgage. I only can get $260,000. That might just knock me out, and that's the key. The first-time buyer not in the market. The second-time buyer who wants to go to his next-level house can't buy either. And knocking out all of these first-time buyers in all of these communities when you really only want to zap Vancouver and Toronto, which were never affordable in the first place, it's not going to work.
I'll get to the hot property. Let me just make one comment. It's easy for me to be glib and laugh when you say we've got the brightest minds. I'm not knocking them, but I want to be clear. Let's also hold them accountable. They've been wrong on a relentless basis about the growth in the Canadian economy. They've been wrong because they haven't understood the impact of taxes and regulation. They were wrong when it came to what pricing oil would be. It continued to be worse than they thought, and I think they'll be wrong in the real estate. So I'm not trying to be, it's glib on my part, but I think it's accurate. Let's go to a hot property.
Well, we got a real cutie. We have a one-bedroom skiing condo in Kimberley. It's 500 square feet, has a balcony, mountain view. It's on the hill itself. It's fully furnished, Mike, and it's on at $53,900. So you put $3,000 down, and the mortgage you pay $240 a month, and plus $280 odd strata for $520. You can move into your own house with fully furniture and a fireplace to put.
But I need a bigger one. Give me a bigger one.
Bigger one, luxury condo, 2-bedroom, 2 baths. Right on the squad chair, only 4 years old, $95,000.
My goodness gracious, I'm moving. Ozzie, thanks for taking the time. Have a terrific weekend.
Thank you very much. And just quickly, Mike, I'm always taking ribbing because I drink beer and have sausages. Well, this weekend I'm building up my upper arm strength. I'm taking lots of selfies.
There you go. A match made in heaven. Ozzie Jurock at Jurock.com.